This morning, we meet to discuss the national security challenges in U.S. military activity in North and South America. We have three witnesses with us. Ms. Melissa Dalton, who's the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Homeland Defense and Hemispheric Affairs at OSD. General Laura Richardson, who is the commander of the U.S. Southern Command, and General Glen VanHerck, who is the commander for U.S. Northern Command and North American Aerospace Defense Command. Greetings, and thank you all for being here. There are a lot of challenges in the world right now, as we all know. I don't think anyone can argue with the basic statement that the threat environment has increased significantly in recent years, in recent months, and even in recent weeks. And most of our focus on that is overseas, in other places. For the last 20 years, we've had a huge focus on the Central Command in Iraq and Afghanistan. We see China, as has been described, the pacing threat in the world. And obviously, we all know the threat from Russia right now, what's going on in Ukraine and the broader threat that they pose. But I think it is very important that we have the commands before us today that we have, because it's important to remember that our primary job is to protect the United States of America, to protect the homeland. And what's closer to home are the primary threats that we need to be worried about. And there's two big things about that. One, there are threats here at home. There continues to be a great deal of instability, certainly in Latin America. We've seen the impacts of that in a variety of different ways. The drug trade, the criminality, immigration flows, all of that has a profound impact on us. Obviously, domestically in the Northern Command, we are concerned about how that impacts us, but there are cyber threats and many others. So there are threats here in this region. But I think as importantly, the threats that are overseas are also present here. Certainly, we all know about how transnational terrorist threats can come home, but Russia and China are both very active in this hemisphere. Certainly in Latin America and elsewhere. So if we are looking at an era of great power competition, then that competition is here as well, and we need to be aware of the threat that that poses. As we talk with our witnesses about how we're going to meet those threats, I'll hit upon the point that this committee has been very focused on for a number of years, and that is, updating our technology and understanding how to meet the threats in this age. To me, it's all about, information and survivability, and certainly here in the Northern Command, protecting our information is at the top. We are very vulnerable to cyber attacks. How do we make sure that we better protect ourselves against that? And then equally, how do we take advantage of innovative new technologies to make sure that our information system, broadly speaking, is robust, effective, and protected? It is my opinion, and I know the ranking member shares this opinion, that the Pentagon still needs to pick up the pace on implementing those new technologies, on making sure that we take advantage of AI, machine learning, and other technologies that are crucial to defending us, to understanding how the battlefield has changed and what it means to truly defend yourself in the modern era. And I think our witnesses today and the commands that they are responsible for are incredibly appropriate to answer some of those questions. How is it going? How are we doing at protecting the homeland? How are we doing with dealing with the threats that are right here in our hemisphere, even as we see the threats metastasize around the world, mindful of the fact that those threats around the world are a lot closer than they may appear in terms of how they can impact our own security here at home. So I look forward to our witnesses' testimony, the questions and answers as always, and with that I yield to the ranking member, Mr. Rogers.
I thank the chairman for holding this hearing. I thank the witnesses for their attendance and their service to our country in the Western Hemisphere. As we focus on the growing threat from China and Putin's appalling act in Ukraine, we must not neglect the many national security challenges in our own backyard. Homeland defense is the foundation of our national security. A strong homeland defense enables us to project power around the globe. We rely on Northcom for everything from ballistic missile defense to stopping illegal trafficking of drugs and migrants across our borders, but its mission is becoming increasingly difficult. Our adversaries are enhancing their ability to strike our homeland with ballistic missiles and now threaten us with hypersonics. Non-state actors trafficking narcotics and human beings across the border continues to be a major problem. In fiscal year 2021, Customs and Border Protection encountered more than 1.6 million inadmissible individuals at the southwest land border. That is the most ever encountered. Last year, border seizures of cocaine grew by 68%, and seizures of fentanyl increased by 134%. CBP is simply overwhelmed. It must rely on support from the Department of Defense and Northcom just to perform its basic mission. I look forward to hearing from General VanHerck and Assistant Secretary Dalton's perspectives on how to best tackle these threats. In Central and South America, instability is growing and further undermining our national security. Southcom works hard to counter instability by building partner capacity, carrying out counter-narcotics operations, and responding to disasters. They do a tremendous amount of good, but their job is becoming more difficult. China and Russia are expanding their influence both economically and militarily in the region. Their presence undermines our national security. To counter these threats, we must build new and enhance existing partnerships in the region. I congratulate General Richardson on her new command, and I look forward to hearing how she intends to tackle these challenges. The threats to our national security in North and South America are complex and increasingly connected to our great power competition. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses and getting their best military advice on how to overcome these challenges. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Dalton.
Chairman Smith, Ranking Member Rogers, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. I am the Principal Civilian Policy Advisor to the Secretary of Defense on Homeland Defense, Mission Assurance, Defense Support of Civil Authorities, Western Hemisphere Affairs, and the Arctic and Global Resilience. I'd like to emphasize 2 points up front. First, DoD is working to increase preparedness to prevent and respond to threats in the homeland, namely from state-based strategic competitors. Second, to build resilience against these threats, DoD is modernizing our approach to partnerships for homeland defense missions. The U.S. homeland faces challenges from state and non-state competitors, as well as transboundary challenges like climate change. These can put DoD's ability to defend the homeland, project power, and counter aggression. The People's Republic of China is the pacing challenge for the department. Its rapidly advancing capabilities could allow the PRC to hold our homeland at risk and disrupt our ability to mobilize the joint force. Russia poses an acute challenge to the United States and our partners. Abroad, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has already resulted in loss of life and threatens global peace and security. At home, Russia has sought to weaken our democracy. Rogue regimes, Iran and North Korea, pose persistent challenges. Iran has attempted to execute influence campaigns in the homeland, including the 2020 presidential election. The DPRK focuses its malicious criminal activity on exploiting international financial systems, allowing it to evade UN sanctions. The United States faces cyber threats from state and non-state actors, their proxies, and cyber criminals. The PRC and Russia are among our most sophisticated cyber competitors. They exfiltrate sensitive information to erode our economic vitality, and they undermine voter confidence. The Western Hemisphere's relative stability can be maintained only by building strong defense relationships with partners in the region. We know that competitors seek to foster instability and that transnational criminal organizations enable corruption and erode democratic institutions in the region. Our nation also faces natural and man-made hazards. COVID-19 has claimed the lives of 936,000 Americans. Last year, the homeland endured 58 major disasters, including hurricanes, wildfires, and flooding. Climate change is affecting the Arctic acutely, opening inroads for U.S. strategic competitors. DoD's priority is to defend the homeland. One of the key ways the department will do this is through integrated deterrence, working seamlessly across warfighting domains, theaters, the spectrum of conflict, other instruments of U.S. national power, and our alliances and partnerships to apply a coordinated effort to alter our competitors' perceptions of the potential costs and benefits of aggression. The resilience of our critical infrastructure and capabilities at home strengthens deterrence of competitor aggression. Central to this effort is building the resilience of critical capabilities, particularly non-DoD-owned capabilities on which we rely. This requires cooperation with our partners in other departments and agencies, state, local, tribal, and territorial governments, and the private sector to address vulnerabilities and build resilience. In the cyberspace domain, DoD is ensuring the joint force can fight and win wars even through disruption and while under attack. DoD also executes cyberspace operations to enable its partners and to disrupt cyber threats. Protecting our democracy from foreign-based malign influence and election interference attacks is a DoD top priority. DoD supports federal, state, and local partners in securing our borders and responding to man-made and natural disasters. Over the last year, this has included providing support to whole-of-government responses to COVID-19, Operation Allies Welcome, and the Southwest border. DoD is supporting the national response to COVID-19, including approximately 118 requests for assistance last year. As of February 28th, DoD had 63 teams totaling 1,424 personnel identified to support hospitals and medical centers. Over the past year, DoD supported care through Operation Allies Welcome for more than 80,000 Afghan evacuees through Operation Allies Welcome, and with temporary housing and medical support at 8 domestic military installations. DoD support for evacuees at military installations has ended, but will continue at a non-DoD facility. DoD has supported DHS's mission at the Southwest border for 17 of the last 21 years. Roughly 2,500 DoD personnel are deployed to the border providing intelligence, analysis, aviation, and other support. To address shared threats in the Western Hemisphere, DoD has partnered with the region's militaries based on support for democratic institutions, civilian control of the military, and respect for human rights. To conclude, the Department is committed to increasing preparedness with partners in and out of government to build homeland resilience and advance U.S. national interests. Thank you for your support of the Department of Defense, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. General Richardson. I don't think your microphone's on there.
Thank you, Chairman.
Great, thanks.
Chairman Smith, Ranking Member Rogers, and distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you alongside General VanHerck and Assistant Secretary Dalton, two of my most important teammates in keeping this Western Hemisphere safe. I am honored to be here with you representing the men and women of United States Southern Command to discuss the challenges we share with our neighbors in this hemisphere, but also the opportunities we can unlock together. Today, more than ever, America's fate is inextricably linked to events beyond our shores. This region, our shared neighborhood, is under assault from a host of cross-cutting, transboundary challenges that directly threaten our homeland. I have been in command for about 4 months now, and the biggest eye-opener for me has been the extent to which China and Russia are aggressively expanding their influence in our neighborhood. Latin America and the Caribbean are experiencing insecurity and instability that has been greatly exacerbated by COVID-19. The People's Republic of China, our long-term strategic competitor, continues its relentless march to expand economic, diplomatic, technological, informational, and military influence in Latin America and the Caribbean, and challenges U.S. influence in all of these domains. Without U.S. leadership, negative PRC influence in this region could soon resemble the self-serving, predatory influence it now holds in Africa. Meanwhile, Russia, a more immediate threat, is increasing its engagements in the hemisphere as Putin looks to keep his options open and maintain relationships in our near abroad. In January, the Russian deputy foreign minister said he could neither affirm nor exclude that Russia would send military assets to Cuba or Venezuela. Just days before the Russia unprovoked invasion of Ukraine, the Russian deputy prime minister visited Nicaragua, Cuba, and Venezuela, countries that maintain close ties with Russia and offer Putin a foothold in our hemisphere. Finally, recent visits between the presidents of Brazil and Argentina with Putin in Russia demonstrate a concerning potential broadening of Russian ties in the region. In this hemisphere, transnational criminal organizations operate nearly uncontested and blaze a trail of corruption and violence. And this creates a wedge and allows the PRC and Russia to exploit these countries. They threaten citizen security, undermine public confidence in government institutions, and drive irregular migration to our homeland. These TCOs traffic opioids, cocaine, and other deadly drugs into the United States, fueling both drug overdoses and drug-related violence that have affected so many of us and our loved ones. In my initial travels to the region, it has become obvious to me that our partners are our best defense. We must use all available levers to strengthen our partnerships with the 28 like-minded democracies in this hemisphere who understand the power of working together to counter these shared threats. We must maximize important tools like security cooperation programs to train and equip our partner militaries, multilateral exercises to build interoperability, and the State Department's IMET, FMF, and FMS programs to educate, train, and build capacity that our partners use to stand shoulder to shoulder with us. Colombia, for example, our strongest partner in the region, exports security by training other Latin American militaries to counter transnational threats. U.S. Southcom is putting integrated deterrence into action every day, using innovative methods to work seamlessly in all domains with the other combatant commands, the Joint Force, allies and partner nations, Congress, the U.S. interagency, NGOs, and the private sector to help build a shared neighborhood that is free, secure, and prosperous for our generation and generations to come. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. General VanHerck.
Chairman Smith, Ranking Member Rogers, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear today. It's my honor to represent the men and women of United States Northern Command and North American Aerospace Defense Command. It's also an honor to appear today with General Richardson and Assistant Secretary Dalton. Northcom and NORAD face the most dynamic and strategically complex environment in their respective histories. The commands face multiple simultaneous challenges from strategic competitors who have openly declared their intent to hold our homelands at risk in an effort to advance their own interests. Today, strategic competitors, rogue nations, non-state actors possess the capability to strike our institutions and critical infrastructure in the United States and Canada. To put it bluntly, our country is under attack every day in the information space and the cyber domain. Our competitors, especially Russia and China, are spreading disinformation, actively sowing division and internal discord with the intent to undermine the foundation of our nation, our democracy, and democracies around the world. We're seeing this play out with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Those same competitors have invested heavily in conventional precision strike capabilities and advanced delivery platforms, which Russia is currently displaying to the world. Their intent is to hold targets in the homeland at risk below the nuclear threshold in order to limit our decision space for our senior leaders by threatening critical infrastructure, by disrupting and delaying our ability to project power globally while attempting to undermine our will to intervene in a regional crisis overseas. I believe the strategic deterrent is the foundation of homeland defense, and that it is necessary for the United States to maintain a reliable and effective nuclear triad. At the same time, I'm concerned that deterrence by cost imposition is currently overweighted and does not adequately account for the conventional capabilities our competitors have already fielded. This over-reliance increases the risk of miscalculation and escalation because it limits our national leaders' options in crisis and in conflict. Our competitors have advanced conventional capabilities make it necessary to balance deterrence by cost imposition with a model of deterrence by denial and an integrated deterrence that employs all elements of national influence, leverages the asymmetric advantage of our allies and partners, and provides leaders with a wide range of timely deterrence options. We must continually demonstrate to potential aggressors that they will not be successful in achieving their objectives with an attack on the homeland by demonstrating our homeland readiness, responsiveness, resiliency, and displaying a range of kinetic and non-kinetic capabilities to deter and, if required, defend the homeland. Northcom's support to civil authorities and security cooperation relationships with allies and partners are critical to integrated deterrence, as is NORAD's mission to provide warning and defend the approaches to North America. This strategic environment is the new normal. The operating model that assumed we could project power globally from a safe and secure homeland has been eroding for the last decade. In order to provide national leaders with timely and informed options, they need to achieve favorable outcomes, Northcom and NORAD in our Homeland Defense design are focused on 4 key principles, starting with all domain awareness, from undersea to on orbit and everywhere in between, to include the cyber domain. All domain awareness is required to achieve information dominance, which is the use of advanced capabilities like machine learning and artificial intelligence to quickly analyze, process, and deliver data to decision makers at the speed of relevance. By doing so, we will increase senior leaders' decision space, enable decision superiority over competitors. Finally, today's problems are all global and all domain and demand globally integrated strategies, plans, and actions. These principles are vital to elements of our ability to execute a layered defense and integrated deterrence, and they are critical to our nation's ability to deter in competition, de-escalate in crisis, and if necessary, defeat in conflict. I'd like to thank the committee for all you've done to support our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Guardians. The FY22 National Defense Authorization Act continues to advance our national defense priorities and the missions of U.S. Northern Command and NORAD. However, today's strategic environment calls for sustained, sufficient, and predictable funding in order to prevail. Persistently operating under a continuing resolution has continued the erosion of our nation's competitive advantage over the last decade. I join my fellow commanders, service chiefs, and the Secretary in stressing the importance of passing the FY22 omnibus and the restoration of normal order in the appropriations process as a matter of national security. Again, thank you for the opportunity to appear today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, and amen on that last point. We are optimistic that we'll pass the appropriations bills next 48 hours, apparently, but hopefully we'll get that done. And in the future, it needs to be a lot closer to October 1st than March 1st, and we are aware of that and working on that. Just 2 quick questions. First for Dalton and General VanHerck on the cyber front. We're aware of the threat. What would you say are the 2 or 3 most important things that this committee can do to help you meet that threat?
Thank you, Chairman. While we don't have specific or credible cyber threats right now as they relate to the current crisis in Russia and Ukraine, we are mindful of the prospect and do see that as Russia is conducting cyber attacks in Ukraine, that there is the potential for spillover.
Right, but speaking more broadly, like I said, we're aware of the threat. What I'm interested in is what, as you look at it and you're looking, whether it's Russia, whether it's China, whether it's, transnational criminals, as our systems are, what are the 2 or 3 most important things you think to meet the threat? And I'll broaden it, not just what this committee can do, but what we as a government need to be doing to meet those threats.
Absolutely, Chairman. So continued support for U.S. Cyber Command and the unique capabilities, talent, and expertise that it brings to the equation. And then more broadly, for authorizers and appropriators that support DHS to ensure that they have the capacity, talent, and expertise to work as part of a whole of government approach and be engaging with the private sector to patch current vulnerabilities is paramount. Thank you.
General.
Thanks, Chairman. The last one I would agree with, capacity. We need to look at the capacity of our cyber defenders, not only across the Department of Defense, but Homeland Security, as well as CISA, are under Director Easterly. This is a domain awareness problem, cyber domain, and we need to have tools and capability to ensure we understand the vulnerabilities within our cyber infrastructure and the critical infrastructure. Also, I would say that we need to look closely at policy and law, which today limits our ability to sometimes look inside our own country at specific vulnerabilities. As we move forward, I think from a national security perspective, we will only become more vulnerable. We don't know what we don't know on some of the critical infrastructure, so we need to go assess some of the limitations in policy and law. We need to figure out from a policy perspective what the most critical infrastructure is that we must defend and apply that to the limited resources that we have, Chairman.
Thank you very much. And General Richardson, as you mentioned, Russia and China are very active in Latin America. Where are we most vulnerable? What are they trying to do, and what should we be doing to counter it, either in terms of the countries they're closest to or what their overall strategy is to destabilize us from being active in your command?
Well, thank you for the question, Chairman. And they are very active, certainly with China and being our long-term strategic competitor. The advances that they've made with the Belt and Road Initiative, 21 of 31 countries have signed on to this initiative. As we know, it starts with the infrastructure economic projects and then furthers into exploitation. A lot of those are state-owned enterprises by China, and certainly we're concerned about the dual use, just like in Africa. I see that the Chinese are using the same playbook that they did in Africa 10 to 15 years ago, and they're using that in the Southcom AOR now. In terms of Russia and what they do to sow discord, undermine our U.S. interests globally, the disinformation campaigns that they have, Russia Today, Spanish, as well as Sputnik, Mundo, the social media, the meddling in elections that our partner nations are very concerned about. And so certainly across the entire region, as we work with our security partners from Colombia, Brazil, very concerned with the inroads that our competitors are making. And we look to outcompete our competitors. We've got to be on the field. We've got to be with them every day. They want to partner with us, and so it's important that we're there and we're working with them with what they need.
Thank you. Mr. Rogers.
General Richardson, you and General VanHerck have done a pretty good job characterizing the threat that both China and Russia pose in your areas of responsibility. Do you expect to see the resources that you need to combat that threat in this year's PBR? General Richardson.
So I haven't seen the budget just yet, but I aspire that it will give us modest investments in the AOR. I think a comprehensive strategy in the Southcom region, as you know, as we know, there, as we look east and west quite a bit, we don't look south so much, and this is a very important AOR, and so. I'm hopeful that we'll get what we need. When we don't, in terms of, we look for other ways of low-cost, high-yield investments. And I'll talk to AI and machine learning here in a little bit, but certainly as we look at innovation and using our AOR as a test bed as well, with the capabilities where we might not have competitors watching us so closely, we're able to work a lot of projects and innovation and things like that for the services and for the Department of Defense.
By saying that you hope you get the modest investment that you need, would that be an increase over what you had in FY 2021?
Congressman, I would say that in terms of, as I do my assessment in the region, I've been in the seat for about 120 days now, 4 months, and I think that we could do better in terms of a comprehensive strategy for the AOR, as opposed to just asking for bits here and there. I don't have assigned forces, and so that forces us to be very innovative, and as we look to partner with our partner nations, militaries, and security forces.
Okay, General VanHerck, same questions.
So I think from a domain awareness perspective, I think I'll see increased support, as I've conveyed over the last 18 months since I've been in command, but I haven't seen the final budget, Congressman. From a theater security cooperation perspective, I think there'll still be work to be done. Little goes a long way in the Western Hemisphere, and to compete as part of integrated deterrence, I think we can do more. China and Russia are both global problems. Instead of running to the South China Sea or to the EUCOM AOR, we need to factor in that they're here in the Western Hemisphere and ensure adequate funding for integrated deterrence as well.
Well, that's the point I want to make, is the theaters that y'all have responsibility for, as well as AFRICOM, are pretty inexpensive for us to do what we need to do. So what I would request is that if, in fact, what you need is not in the President's budget request, that you will guarantee this committee that you will try to get it in your unfunded requirements list.
Congressman, I will absolutely do that.
General Richardson?
Yes, Congressman.
Okay, General VanHerck, in your testimony, you referenced Russian capability to launch cruise missiles at the Homeland. Can you update us on what NORAD is doing to improve our capability to defend against that threat?
Yes, sir. So we're working closely with the department and with the Department of National Defense in Canada on our Homeland Defense design, which starts with domain awareness, as I previously discussed. I look forward to seeing the 23 budget. I'm confident that we're going to move the ball, if you will, down the field on domain awareness, both in the air domain, space domain, and undersea domain. We do need to work more on NORAD modernization on the way forward, which would include infrastructure in the Arctic to get after that problem, which also allows me to position forces for the cruise missile problem that you're talking about, as well as having organized, trained, and ready forces to operate out throughout my AOR. That's a challenge for the services today that we're working closely with. The final thing I would say, Congressman, on cruise missile defense is the department needs to select a single point of contact to own cruise missile defense of the homeland, and we haven't done that in accordance with the NDAA that directed us, I believe, in 17.
Do you expect that to happen?
We're working closely with the department on the missile defense review. I've advocated to have a specific point of contact. I think we'll get there, but I haven't seen the final version.
Okay, thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Langevin is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Mr. Langevin?
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we got you. Go ahead, Jim.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, our witnesses, for your testimony today. The chairman was right to focus on the cyber challenges that we face, and I want to build on that. Ms. Dalton, in your testimony, you stated that we are developing new opportunities to help partners improve their cyber
Jim,
network.
sorry, could you get a
Yes.
little closer to your mic? We hear you, but it's kind of faint.
Okay, is that any better?
Yes.
Okay. I'll start over again. This is for Ms. Dalton. In your testimony, you stated that we're developing new opportunities to help partners improve their cyber and network defense capabilities so they can deter, detect, and defend against cyber threats in support of a free, secure Western Hemisphere. And let me just say, I'm certainly glad to hear that. I think it's very appropriate, as I've long believed that we'll never again fight a war without some type of a cyber component to it. So in this unclassified setting, can you expand on the work that is being done with our partner nations in the Western Hemisphere when it comes to cyber?
Thank you, Congressman, and it's an excellent question and an area that I look forward to building upon as Assistant Secretary. I'd like to break down the response actually into two parts in terms of the range of partners that we work with on this challenge set. First of all, domestically, with the private sector and with the defense industrial base, we have three entities that work very closely to provide, with the private sector, to provide cybersecurity services and tools. Our Defense Cyber Crimes Center, the National Defense Information Sharing and Analysis Center, and of course NSA, all provide cybersecurity services to key defense industrial-based companies to help identify key vulnerabilities, potential mitigations, and also can enhance information sharing in the event of attack to other partners in the DIB. So that's a very important line of effort that we are building out closely with our colleagues in the interagency. And then with respect to partners in the hemisphere, through our security cooperation efforts, we are increasingly looking for opportunities to provide cybersecurity patches. There's a lot of great, actually, capability and technology that's off the shelf commercially that we can provide to partners. So it's really along those two tracks that we are working along those lines. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope we can increase those engagements sooner rather than later as well. General Richardson and General VanHerck, how is cyber being utilized and developed in your defensive strategies? General Richardson?
In terms of cyber, we have We need to do better in cyber. Our countries want to work with us. They aren't very long in terms of their cyber capabilities. And so in terms of working through, they all want help and assistance with cyber, with their networks, making sure that they have protected networks. And so we have small teams, joint cyber capability assessment teams that we send, about 13-man teams with cyber experts and network experts to these countries and help with our partner nations, help do over-the-shoulder training to try to assist them with this because they are very much worried about the protection of their cyber capabilities and their networks.
Congressman, it's important to point out the mission of United States Northern Command in the cyber domain. I'm the discus synchronizer for support that would be provided to CISA if we needed to respond outside of either the DoDIN, the DoD infrastructure, or federal networks that CISA provides. That cyber protection forces would be provided through me to support that. We are closely partnering with both CISA, Homeland Security, and Cybercom to further our partnerships to understand the threat as well. I would also provide defense support of civil authorities in the event there are outcomes from a cyber attack, such as lack of potable water, fuel, those kinds of things as well. I think it's important to go back to a comment that I made that we're partnering with the department first, but also with the interagency through DHS, is to identify the key critical infrastructure that must be defended, those things that would be strategically significant if identified in a crisis that could bring us to our knees, whether that be power projection, finance, energy, those kinds of things. Those are all key parts of our strategy.
And last question, in what ways are you prioritizing joint initiatives such as JADC2?
At Northcom and NORAD, we're absolutely prioritizing JADC2, as I said in my opening statement. We're conducting experiments, the Global Information Dominance experiment that brings all the combatant commands together. JADC2 is required to execute the integrated deterrence strategy.
Gentleman's time's expired. The chair recognizes Representative Wilson, South Carolina, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank each of you for your service. It's so inspiring. And General Richardson, I recently was at Southcom, and so congratulations on your command. What extraordinary people that you have serving with you. I am grateful that the South Carolina National Guard bilateral cooperation is with the nation of Colombia through the State Partnership Program. It's only appropriate Colombia to Colombia. Our dedicated National Guard soldiers are dedicated to working with the Colombian military and capacity. It will be used against the criminal cartels that manufacture illicit drugs, including fentanyl, which will end up in the United States being smuggled across, sadly, our open border. What other bilateral agreements are underway to empower our South American partners to fight back against drug smuggling?
So, Congressman, thank you so much for mentioning the State Partnership Program and the state of South Carolina's relationship with Colombia and Colombia to Colombia. So, absolutely. What a huge enabler to our efforts in the Southcom AOR. The National Guard State Partnership Programs are aligned with our strategy and with our campaign plan in Southcom. And they are so important because they've had relationships over decades. And you really look at the strength and the trust with our partner nations. Our National Guard State Partnership Program is absolutely key to that. And so in terms of the bilateral agreements, I'd like to talk about the Columbia staff talks we just had at the Southcom headquarters with the Chief of Defense and his joint staff that came. And we had developed a framework. Believe it or not, we've had such a great relationship over the past couple of decades with Colombia, but actually developed a framework and then lines of effort with things that we wanted to work towards. They have very important elections in Colombia coming up the end of May. And so we want to make sure that what we've seen in countries that have elections and change administrations is that the security relationships maintained are strong. They continue to be strong. But we wanted to put in writing these lines of effort and our focus areas that we wanted to work towards. 3 lines of effort with about 6 focus areas per each one. And we both signed that, myself and the Chief of Defense, General Navarro, in January. So we look forward to continuing to strengthen our military partnerships in cyber, in the human rights, rule of law, women, peace, and security. I mean, it covers the whole gamut of what we do in security cooperation with our partner nations. And quite honestly, our partner nations are our best defense.
And I want to congratulate you. Socialist dictator Maduro of Venezuela, of all things, is violating international sanctions and buying oil from Iran. And this, in fact, you have already stopped 1.1 million barrels of Iranian petroleum products, which were going to Venezuela, which would actually pay for terrorist activity to achieve their goal of death to Israel, death to America. And so what is being done, again, to stop such violations by the Maduro dictatorship?
So, Congressman, I appreciate that. As we know, Iran is the single largest state sponsor of terror in the world. They exchange arms and petroleum to avoid sanctions, and they exchange that with Venezuela. And so in terms of the sanctions and things like that, that's more of an administration question. I don't get into the sanctions part of what we do for Southcom.
Thank you. It's inconceivable. A great country like Venezuela that should be producing oil and benefiting the people of their country to buy Iranian oil. It's just, it's mind-numbing how insane this is. Secretary Dalton, I visited the U.S. border and with Mexico, and it was shocking to me to see an open border where there's human trafficking, drug cartels, and terrorists. With Homeland Security, how many on the terrorist watch list have crossed the southern border in the last year?
Congressman, thank you so much for highlighting this critical issue for our country and for our partners in the region. This will absolutely be a priority of mine as Assistant Secretary to work closely with interagency partners and partners in the region to address. For your specific question, I will have to take that for the record. I don't have the number at my disposal, but would be happy to respond.
Thank you. Well, the American people need to know how many terrorists have come across. I yield back. Thank you.
Mr. Larson is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. General VanHerck, I had some other questions set up, but then you mentioned that it sounded like the DoD was thinking of going into the intelligence collection business inside the United States. Could you clarify your comments so I understand what you were talking about and how you propose to stay on your side of the line?
Congressman, I did not say DOD should go into intelligence collection. I said from a national security perspective, we need to analyze policy and law to ensure that it best meets our nation's needs, to ensure we have full domain awareness of where our risks are.
So why can't we rely on civilian law enforcement to do that why can't DOD cooperate with civilian law enforcement to do that?
We can certainly. That should be DHS in my mind doing most of that.
So why would you need additional authorities or policy to do that when that exists?
I just think we need to look at the whole broad nature of that and ensure we fully understand where the risk and vulnerabilities are. I'm not advocating that we need to do it right now, but we do need to understand where our vulnerabilities are from a national security perspective. Right now,
you might be right. Are you saying, have you concluded that we don't?
No, I'm not saying that. I said we need to go look at it to ensure we fully understand where those vulnerabilities may be. The world is changing, Congressman, dramatically.
General, I'm fully aware the world is changing, but thank you for reminding me. Secretary Dalton, on page 7 of your testimony, you discuss a recent initiative to institutionalize capability to conduct the deep data-driven analysis required to understand critical infrastructure dependencies. Is that related to what the General is mentioning, or is that something different?
Thank you, Congressman, for highlighting this issue. I believe that it is related in the sense that in working closely with civilian-led agencies that have the lead for protections here at home. DoD is working very closely with the interagency to understand where critical vulnerabilities may exist, and then if working together, we have the right tool set in place to close those vulnerabilities. So that work is ongoing, working very closely with Northcom and other components in the department, but in support of civilian-led agency efforts.
All right. General, I understand questions are firm and perhaps uncomfortable, so I don't, part of it is putting you on the spot just to answer our questions because you are sitting on the spot. So I'm not trying to get at you personally, but I want to be assured, having been here for the 22 years and seen the world change over that period of time, and having had experience in those 22 years with oversight at the DoD, I want to be sure that at least I'm getting my point across about that that past experiences where the DoD has crossed that line. I'm not comfortable with that. I just want to make that point to you and try to do it in a nicer way in my second chance with you on that. So that's the first thing. The second, I do want to ask you, in particular, the department's doing 5G pilot projects throughout throughout bases in CONUS, and just wondering about your role, Northcom's role in those 5G projects and what you expect to get, what results you expect to get and use from those pilot projects.
It is not my role. I would point that out, Congressman, but I do applaud the department for looking at. In time of crisis and conflict, it is important to be able to have the ability to command and control forces across the homeland and around the globe. 5G could provide additional capability and capacity to do that through data and voice capability.
All right, thanks. General Richardson, can you comment on the role Southcom is playing, the role SOCOM is playing in Southcom, to the extent that you can share that with us here in the committee?
So I have a component command, the Special Operations Command South, so SOC South, and one of the theater Special Operations Commands, and they're doing a fantastic job. Small teams that are working with partner nations in 12 to 17 countries, depending on which day, doing low level. They've had these relationships augmented by 7th Group that in terms of cultural training, language training, working with these Latin American countries for many, many years. Already built the trust, and really proud of my special ops team, and then the support that I get from General Clark and SOCOM if we need extra capability, or sometimes we cost share on some AI, ML programs,
I'm sorry,
and things like that.
has expired. I think Congressman Larson raises an important point. We talked a little bit about it when we met, General VanHerck, and I think what you're talking about is the vulnerabilities within the U.S. systems. A lot of that is in the private sector. We saw it in the energy sector when we got hit by cyber. There's also food processing, all kinds of places. And while you and others are in charge of protecting our critical infrastructure, you don't know. They can be attacked, and we won't ever see it. So how do we deal with that? But Congressman Larson raises the right point. In our country, we don't do it by the government, inserting themselves. But I think it's going to be a difficult policy choice. I appreciate him raising that issue, and it's something we need to talk about. How do we protect against those vulnerabilities without having the government reaching into information that our Constitution and our laws don't allow them to? It is a big challenge to protect ourselves and protect our civil liberties. Mr. Lamborn is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Dalton, I know you're new to your position, so maybe that explains it, but I didn't see anything in your written statement about missile defense, and yet that's a critical job in your portfolio to help with missile defense. Northcom, I'm about to ask some questions of General VanHerck about that, but I really would urge you to get up to speed as quickly as possible. And we haven't seen the missile defense review that's I think overdue already. I hope there's no weakening in that when that comes out on the part of this administration. Okay, General VanHerck, I was in your office real recently, a few weeks ago, and one of the things we talked about was North Korea and the missile defense capabilities that we need to have to counteract their threat. Now, I know we'll have a classified session later today. But here in open session, what can you say about our ability to keep up with the evolving North Korean missile threat?
Congressman, I'm currently comfortable with the capability we have today for ballistic missile defense against the threat that I see today out of North Korea. Certainly, they're trying to increase their capacity and capability. That's why you see the tests, 9 since the beginning of the year. That will challenge us going forward. I would point out that North Korea is a very tough target to gain intelligence to understand their exact capability and capacity. Going forward, it is crucial to keep Next Generation Interceptor on target, on time, if not field it sooner, and continue to service life extend the current system to give us more reliance and capability as well.
Okay, thank you. And what about the threat? Do we need to make changes in our space architecture to detect, whether it's that threat or better detect hypersonic threats from near peers like Russia and China?
Congressman, I believe, yes, we need to go to space as soon as possible to detect hypersonic threats that will challenge my ability from a domain awareness perspective to see them and provide what I think is crucial. That's threat warning and attack assessment that directly informs continuity of government, posture of the nuclear forces, and those kinds of things.
Okay, thank you. And General Richardson, you already answered some very good questions by my colleague, Representative Wilson, about drug interdiction and fentanyl in particular. I know you have a lot of responsibilities, but drug interdiction is one of those, is it not?
So, Congressman, by law, we do the detection and monitoring to help with our interagency and partner nations do the interdictions.
That's excellent, because fentanyl and other drugs are a crisis in our country. And I noticed in our briefing paper on page 5, it says DOD has an interest in preventing drug trafficking organizations that operate with tacit or explicit support of Venezuelan authorities from entering the United States. What can you tell us about Venezuela's involvement in drug trafficking?
Well, certainly, drug trafficking is very prevalent in the as it comes from the Central American and north tip of South America towards the homeland, and certainly. Transnational criminal organizations are very prevalent. As I said before, we work very hard on the detection and monitoring. I'd like to highlight that we have 16 interagency at my JIATF South Command in Key West, as well as 23 foreign liaison officers. And quite honestly, it's a great news story in terms of the training investment that we provide with our partner nations, sharing of actionable information. They have increased by 62% the interdiction.
That's excellent. I'm going to have to interrupt because my time is about to run out. I'm concerned about, and I've zeroed in on Venezuela in particular, because according to sources in the news, I don't know if this is accurate or not, but apparently we have administration officials that are about to or have gone to Venezuela to talk about importing some of their oil to the U.S. to replace the possible loss from stopping Russian oil imports. And I would just be real concerned if that's true. You don't have to answer this, but I'd just be really concerned if Venezuela plays any part of supplying U.S. energy when we have American energy that's just sitting there not being used because we've shut down permitting and pipelines and everything else. Mr. Chairman, I yield back to you.
Thank you. It is worth noting that we're at the highest level of production of oil and natural gas that we've ever been at, and it's going up literally every week. Certainly we could do better, but it's going up, not down. Just want to make sure we're clear on that. Mr. Courtney is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses for being here this morning. General VanHerck, in your testimony, your written testimony on page 6, you did focus on the maritime domain, where you talked about the fact that Russia launched its second Severodvinsk cruise missile sub this year, and there's more on deck, and there are shipyards that are there. You described them as designed to deploy within cruise missile range of our coastlines. Again, having been through a few of these hearings, normally that's a focus on EUCOM, but I mean, I think now that it's in Northcom's, we're obviously dealing again with something that is very close to home. Later in your testimony on page 17, you talked about the fact that we need to increase our maritime domain awareness and that we can, in fact, quickly improve that with the IUSS sensors and the OTHR sensors. Again, maybe you can just sort of explain what that means a little bit, in an unclassified fashion, because acronyms, I think, kind of go over a lot of people's heads.
Absolutely, Congressman. So from a domain awareness perspective, first for the submarines that you're talking about, that would be the integrated undersea surveillance capability that the Navy brings. And I would point out that Canada partners with us on and provides some of that capability as well to track and maintain awareness of submarine positions around the globe. A very challenging environment in the central Atlantic when they get on the mid-Atlantic ridge to be able to track them. And so to hold them accountable, if you will, before they become a threat is important. That's part of that integrated deterrence that we also talked about. And we partner very closely with UCOM, and we need to move that into the Pacific as well. I'm confident that we'll see some of that in the 23 budget that we talked about. You mentioned the SEV, the second one. They're on their way to Field 9. Russia will be a persistent proximate threat to the homeland in the maritime domain within the next 5 years. China is about a decade behind, but they will do the same thing. And so 24/7 in the near future, we'll have both persistent proximate threat in the submarine, from a submarine perspective, but also surface. OTHR, over-the-horizon radar capability, gives us out to about 4,000 miles in the maritime domain and the air and space domain to be able to see much further than we can today. We're limited today by curvature of the Earth because typical radar systems have that limit because they can't see over that. Over the horizon gives us that, and the undersea gives us the undersea domain awareness as well.
Great. Well, thank you. I mean, again, I think the one comment you made in your testimony is that those systems can actually be quickly deployed. And I know this committee will be watching for that in the 23 budget when it comes over.
Congressman, you're
Sure.
exactly right. Over-the-horizon technology exists today. It's employed by other nations around the globe. It's something that we can move out on relatively quickly, as well as undersea surveillance.
And the point that this is a really almost iconic example of integrated deterrence. I mean, anti-submarine warfare is a team sport, and having Canada with the new agreement that the president signed in 2021, that to modernize NORAD, I think, this is again a poster child example of that, and the same is true in the North Atlantic. General Richardson, congratulations on your new position. Your testimony, you mentioned again the success of the LCS in terms of counter-narcotics, which kind of echoes General Fowler last time he was here. It seems like the LCS has finally sort of found a home in terms of its long career. But I would just note that last year the Navy came over to decommission 4 LCSs. We still don't know what's in 2023. I think some of the chatter is that we're probably going to see some of that in the budget that's there. It seems like, given the fact that we're selling Coast Guard ships to Latin American allies, that the LCS, given its success that you've described, would be a great candidate for foreign military sales to some of our allies to bolster their navies. I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, certainly, I think FMS is definitely a tool. We have to make sure that our partner nations can maintain the vessel, and that's what's really important about the equipment. We have to make sure that it's great to get the equipment. We've got to be able to maintain it and help them through that as well. And I think that's an area that we can certainly help in Southcom with our partner nation militaries. Logistics is hard. Maintenance is hard. The LCS has done a fantastic job in my AOR. I don't get a lot of assets. I don't have assigned forces, and I have very little gift map resources that I do get, but I do have 2 LCSs right now. They do a fantastic job working with the CNO to get maintenance done in the theater, so when it has to do maintenance while it's in my AOR, it doesn't have to sail back to Mayport, Florida, take a week to sail back, a week to sail back in the theater.
The gentleman's time has expired. I should have said this at the outset. Even if we're in mid-question, we try to cut it off right at the time and get on to the next person, which we will do now, and that is Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Generals, and ma'am, thank you for being here. And Ms. Dalton and General Richardson. I think this next statement is predominantly for you. And Ms. Dalton, I know you spent a fair amount of time at the Defense Intelligence Agency in some dealing with some pretty sporty regions of the world. When we talk about Southcom, we typically talk about the fact that more Americans lose their lives to drug overdoses, not all of it coming from that region, but a lot of it, than to terrorism. We talk about gangs, we talk about drugs, we talk about crypto, cyber, China, Russia, and the disruptions to democracy in the Western Hemisphere. 12 months from now, I think we're going to be talking about the issue of hunger and the disruption of democracies in the Western Hemisphere because of the lack of food supply. This is a direct result of Russia's incursion into the Ukraine. It is going to come from the loss of the ability to put fertilizer on a lot of crops around the world. My understanding is that the Russians have now said they're going to withhold fertilizer from the rest of the world, including countries like Brazil, who produce a tremendous amount of food supply. I don't expect you to answer this question necessarily, but I do think it would be worthwhile for this committee to see work done from the Defense Intelligence Agency on what a 5% reduction in the global food supply and a 10% reduction in the global food supply would mean to the people in the Western Hemisphere and the potential disruption of democracies in that hemisphere. And so if you could help us have the Defense Intelligence Agency work on that, I would very much appreciate it. I do think this is coming. Russia and the Ukraine are responsible for about 12% of the calorie supply inside the United States, is my understanding. If the Ukrainians are not able to plant their crops over the next couple of months, and it certainly does not look like they will be able to, there's going to be a tremendous disruption in the food supply. And if the fertilizer is not able to come out of the Black Sea region, and it does not look like it's going to be able to, there's going to be a significant reduction in the global food supply. I can tell you farmers in the southeastern United States, where they normally would plant crops on what we call dry land that does not have irrigation, and the production on those pieces of dirt are not as productive as they are if it's irrigated. Farmers, because of the cost, whether it be diesel or fertilizer, in many cases are not going to plant the dry land fields. And I think that it would do well for the U.S. to be prepared for the potential disruption in democracies from food supply. So any help with that would be appreciated. With that said, I want to go back to the Russia issue in Southcom. You've hit on it before. They continue to exert their influence in the Southcom AOR. The disinformation and propaganda that they have become very good at. General Richardson, would you go over our strategy again with regard to how we combat Russia and their misinformation? And I would appreciate it, especially if you could talk about it with regard to Venezuela and Cuba.
So our partner nations are very concerned about this, and they voice that, Colombia voices that, very concerned with the disinformation that they sow. The Russian media conglomeration, Russia Today in Spanish, as well as the Sputnik Mundo that I mentioned earlier, is continue. I mean, it used to have 7 million followers in RT Spanish, and now it's over 18 million. Their ability to put out disinformation and just sow an environment that is full of untruths is very prevalent in the region. And so we work very closely with our partner nations with Colombia, with Brazil, in the cyber capabilities, with the small teams that we'll send forward. Our National Guard state partnership programs, they have the cyber battalions that are very effective, and so we try to utilize those capabilities because there aren't enough high-end capabilities, and certainly Southcom is not the priority AOR, so we work very closely with our state partnership program.
I'm almost out of time, but is there discussion about actually taking those channels off the networks?
So we're aware that as of yesterday, we got the report that Ecuador took RT Spanish off their network, which is really good. And so we'll continue to work with our partner nations. And
Thank you. And again, I
Thank you
just
all.
apologize. Gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Garamini is recognized for 5 minutes.